right, so can you tell me your name and your title? What do you do?
Michelle Rice. I'm the general manager of TV1 and Clio TV.
Fantastic. So let's start a little bit with your backstory. How did you get to where you are today in your career?
Well, I guess it's a long journey. Starting with, being a little girl growing up in New Jersey and not seeing a lot of images of women of color on television. And so it was always a goal of mine to be seen or have a voice, and making sure that there were stories on television that authentically portrayed people of color. And so that was probably my biggest motivation with initially wanting to be on television in front of the camera. And then I went to school for broadcast journalism, and then decided I learned a lot about careers. No one in my family had a career in television, so going to school obviously gave me that exposure, and then determined that I wanted to be behind the camera. And so I set my sights on television management and went to Temple University undergraduate in USC for communications management, a master's degree program.
And who were some of your early influences?
Certainly seeing people like Oprah Winfrey on television, but not only in front of the camera, understanding that she was a very smart businesswoman, one of the first women, African American women, to become extremely wealthy, owning rights to her content and syndicating her own show. And so knowing that I needed to not only be in the business, but really understand the business models. I think that was a big influence on me coming up through school.
Right. And then what about advice? Advice that you've either gotten that you've loved and really taken to heart, advice that you would give and pass
One of the biggest influences on me were my mother, and both of my grandmothers. And my grandparents, always basically told all of us, particularly the girls, that we could do anything. You can be anything that you aspire to be. And I think a lot of people are taught that failure is not an option. And I think that we were taught failure is an option. Go out and try things and take risks, obviously calculated risks, but fail forward. And don't look at failure doesn't have to be the end. It's a pivot. I mean, the example of me going to school thinking I wanted to do something and then changing my mind. Some people could say, oh, you did that and you failed. You didn't, become a news anchor. But I took a pivot. I took a different approach to my goals. And I think it's very important for people not to be afraid of failure, because if you're afraid of failing, you'll never try.
And then speaking of failure, what hurdles have you had to go through to get here?
I mean, there are a lot of hurdles for women and for women of color in media in general. I mean, the lack of mentors and sponsors for women coming up in the media business. There are not a lot of people that, kind of help you along the way, help navigate the road. So, equity, obviously there were gender equity issues and continue to be, frankly, gender equity issues in our business. And so those are hurdles, but they're not things that deterred me. They obviously made me want to work harder, and they made me want to fight for fairness in media for women and people of color. And so organizations like this one that really highlights and supports women through mentorship is very important to me, and I'm involved in a lot of mentoring of young women in general in media.
Yeah, so let's talk about this. So why are organizations like this, and why is honoring women in general important?
Well, I think it's important for people to see what you can be. If you don't know, I mean, I feel extremely fortunate. As I said, I didn't have anyone in my family that was on television or in the television business, and nor did I see that as a young woman. I think seeing that, you understand the art of the possible. And so I think it's very important to highlight the path of how you got here, whether it was a straight path or crooked path, that other people can look to that and say, this is how she did it, I can do that. We have a show on a new network that we launched in January called Cleo Speaks, that we highlight young women of color who have made it in their careers. And many of them have been through crooked paths. And you look at them and say, you know, this one was a teenage mom, or this one dropped out of school, but now they're running multi-million-dollar companies, or they're living their dreams. And for other people to see that through someone else's journey that may be similar to yours, I think is very powerful.
And is there anything that you would change about your career path to get to where you are now?
No, I don't think I would. I think that everything that I've been through has helped me become the person and the professional that I am. So I don't know that I would change a thing.
And are there any trends that you want to talk about that you see in media today?
Well, I'm excited to see, you know, all the different platforms that are now available, from, you know, Netflix and Hulu, you know, from traditional broadcast television to the non-traditional, non-linear forms of television. Just gives a lot of new voices an opportunity to put their content out there. I mean, look at Issa Rae, who had a web series on the internet, and now she's a director, a writer, and has a very successful career and show on HBO that was based on that web series. So I love the fact that there's so many opportunities and avenues for content, and that people are actually starting, based on the success of some of those authentic voices, seeing women and people of color can draw big audiences. And so it's been a great testing ground to help people understand that if you're just telling great stories, anybody will watch. And so I think that that's a great trend in this business, to provide more opportunities for new and unique voices.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with me, and I look forward to seeing the things that you do next.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.